Welcome back to the Energy Sovereignty Project and our closeout for the third week in March. My apologies for getting this out so late. We had a very unfortunate swap drive crash. One of the swap drives that we use in production wound up crashing at the worst possible time, as usually happens. Not there's really a good time for that to happen, but anyway. It did take out our introduction video, however. That was the very thing that I was actually working on when the drive crashed, and it corrupted that video. So we'll have to open it up here in the studio. That also means that I've recorded this way later, almost a month later. And so the result of that is that I have some knowledge going into this that I wouldn't normally have when I'm doing the updates. So that you'll have to forgive me for as well. We'll get ourselves back on track here following this video. But let's get started. All right, well, like I said, welcome back. And the days obviously are starting to get longer, and we put the system back on zombie apocalypse mode on the 14th, as you saw in the last update. And with the system kind of peaking on the 15th at just over 90%, then obviously the danger becomes if you run the system too high, it'll shut off the solar. And so I actually had to go back to the system and start charging slightly before we had gotten done with our total solar day. And so here we have the information for March 15th. There we go. And so, yeah, good sunny day. System's on zombie apocalypse mode. That green symbol there, we're using that for denoting that we are charging the vehicle during the day, and then obviously the car icon and showing that there were 19 miles put on the car since the well on this day, given the difference between the miles shown when we start the day today and when the vehicle starts this day the following day. And so again, pretty typical stuff here. We're seeing that the time of production keeps creeping further into the early morning, and most notably the time that the production ends is going further and further out. Currently it's 7 p.m. here. Total solar day, again, like I said, we peaked out at 91% and then brought it down to 70% after some charge was put into the vehicle. So let me pull up some forecast information as well here real quick. So boom. And so as you can see here, we have a forecast for sunny weather for the next 3 days, and then 58% showing at the end of the week, and still not too bad. But as we have seen before, that can worsen as we go, and also sometimes that can be just the harbinger of things to come, where you'll have 58% on that day, but then consecutive days will be rainy. So we really don't have too much information beyond that. But the graph here, let's pull these guys up. There, that shows what we did. Don't let the yesterday thing throw you. That it was simply a screenshot that was taken the following day, so that I could show the entire day instead of having to wait up until midnight or 1 in the morning to take the screenshot. But what it shows here is the system was that when I recorded that 91%, if you look at that crossing, that downward crossing line, that it actually occurs before the end of the total solar day. And again, the reason for that is that it was at 91% and we were still producing. And my concern was that we would then wind up getting too close to that 95 to 98% mark and then have it shut off. And so it just wasn't worth it. So I started the vehicle charging a little early. And so then here is the second part, our notes section. Again, pretty typical stuff. Vehicle received 16 kilowatt hours, showing the odometer reading and all of that stuff. No notes for that day. And so then this sets us up for the 16th. Here's the 16th. We already knew it was going to be a pretty sunny day. Again, sunny. We're still off of the grid. Charged the car a bit and wound up driving ultimately 50 miles today. And again, time of production start, 7:25. And time of production end on this one was 6:50. We wound up tapering off a little early because of some cloud cover, but it was still mostly sunny for the time that the system was producing, as evidenced by the fact that we put nearly 50 kilowatt hours into the system. And let's see what we got here. So then these for the notes. Here we go. So we'll put 20 kilowatt hours of charge into the vehicle, and then all the vehicle information there. And so one thing that you kind of notice in the notes here, one of the things that I'm starting to be concerned with, or was starting to be concerned with, was how to accurately relate what was going on with the vehicle. And so I'm looking at things like evening losses and all of that and trying to figure out a way to best present that as we move forward. The vehicle losses are important, but on the whole, I don't think that they're as important as basically how far did the vehicle go and how much charge did it take to go that distance. And included in there are those vehicle losses. And so we'll probably come back to things like vampire loss, and then you can kind of compare what your own vehicles are like. But again, ultimately, it's just going to come down to miles driven per amount of power put in. So here's the 17th. Again, 85 miles driven, pretty good. Doing pretty good on sunlight here. And production numbers, 45.5 kilowatt hours, pretty good. And then our notes section there. And again, more of the same, decent production. Like it says in the notes, again, starting to focus more on that vehicle situation. We want to make sure that we present that accurately and in a way that's not confusing. We want to try and make things as clear as possible. And so, again, focusing on miles driven per power. And so on the, as we look at some of this stuff here, my goal is just to kind of give accurate expectations, and mostly we'll be retrieving that by tracking the power and the miles. And so let's take a shot here. Where did I put that? Here we go. So and so to make that more clear, this is a shot of the trip meter on the car. And so what you'll notice here is the trip A. Now the trip A was reset on midnight of the first of the year, and that then represents the total number of miles driven by the vehicle, both to this time when you look at the odometer that checks out, but also when we get to the end of the year, we'll be able to use that number, like I said, calculating in how many miles you've driven and how much power it took to get you there. And so then that'll allow us then to subtract how many miles we put in, how much was done through sunlight, and then how much we had to get through other means. And then that will allow you also to overlay your usage in miles over that, and that will allow you also to see how many miles of energy you would have had to have put into the vehicle to cover your own driving. And And unfortunately, like I said in some of the previous videos, I probably don't drive as much as most people do. Single car, single use family. I have my studio relatively close to where I live. And so I'd really love to hear from some of you guys as we progress through this, and certainly as we close out the year, how this compares to your own driving and how you use power in both your home and your vehicles. And so here we bring up March 18th, another sunny day. Not much to say there other than what it shows, and again the times are creeping forward, getting that broader amount of time that we're able to charge during the day. And then here are the notes sections here. So got 21 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. And then the thing to take away here from the notes is that we have to make allowances for rainy weather. We're still in that shoulder period. And so our goal here for this day was to get us as close to 60% as possible. And then that hopefully would have gotten us through the next couple of days of rainy weather that were predicted. But sometimes the system throws a curve at us a little bit, and let me pull this up. At 7:20, it was still showing a communications error. When you know you have power in the system and you get a return of this screen where it shows 0%, it's not communicating. So that was a drag. I'm trying to hit that 60% number as close as possible, and the system wasn't reporting to Tesla, and therefore also it wasn't then reporting back. Couldn't get the information here. So, around 7:32 all came back, and that was about when I was just about ready to shut it off anyway. And so this shows that the system was 56%. And so then I was able to cut it off. And then this final one here shows the graph for that day, and that shows what that looks like there. Started the charge pretty late in the day, and this is pretty typical. What this will do is when you are trying to make that decision, and again, it's convenient. You're generally coming home after work, and you'll look at how much power you have in the battery, what was your total solar day, where did you end your day at, and that will dictate how many miles you can throw back onto the vehicle if you don't want to have to touch the grid at all. And so this shows that pretty clearly. Right near the end of the total solar day, I already knew what I was going to wind up with, and so then I could start my vehicle charge, stop at that number, and we'd be good. So then what we're left with was 60% enough? So the 19th looked like this. So you'll notice that we have a maintenance symbol there. The maintenance symbol is because SMUD had to come by to do a really quick check of how everything was labeled, and of course that requires them to measure a couple of the circuits, and so we had to very briefly turn the system off, but an interruption is an interruption, so we logged it as that. So there we go, and there's the notes section again, like it shows here. Quick little system check. And I'll pull this up here real quick as well. I'll give you a second to read that. And so then this is kind of typically what you see on a cloudy day. It's not a smooth curve. Everything's just very fractured. And then if you look very closely as well, you can see that tick right around 10:30. And that was where the system and the house had to be shut off briefly while they took their measurements. And then the result of the day, this is what the graph, this is what the representation from the Tesla Powerwall application on the phone shows you. That's the kind of readouts that it gives you there. And but yeah, pretty good example of the fluctuations you get on a cloudy day. Again, the ideal time to select how much power you're going to put in, being right around that that total solar day. And so then here we'll pull up the 20th. There we go. And again, another maintenance day. This one was because of our solar provider, SunWorks, had to come by to try and see how they were going to bring the system into compliance with a demand, the requirement that SMUD had on how that was all set up. But decent production. Had 40.3 kilowatt hours. I guess I need to edit that. I can put the kilowatt hours on there. But, keep a little consistency there. And then here was the notes section. 28 kilowatt hours went to the vehicle. That's all our vehicle information. Like we noted earlier, the drop in available miles to power of the vehicle at the end of the day fluctuates a little bit depending on what the temperature is in the evening. And then the maintenance obviously listed there. And so then what brings us up to the forecast for the next few days. This was problematic. So as you can see here, that we actually had some pretty good production this day being that top 84% day. But like happens, as happens sometimes, the most of the cloudy weather came early in the day, and then it clouded over again in the evening after solar production had taken place. And so we actually did do some pretty decent production. But when you see something in the 80s and 90s, you really can't count on that production. So you have to be very careful there. And again, it's showing that though tomorrow will be 12%, the day after that is 87. And even though you see the following day as 36, we still have to be careful this time of year. That 36 depends greatly on where that cloud cover occurs. If it occurs right during peak production time, then that can really mess you up. So that's the prediction there. And so then let's see how we made out. So on the 21st, boom, did pretty good. So that's that 12% day cloud cover. And so 49.4 kilowatt hours of production, really nice. We were able to put some decent power into the vehicle, but we have to be careful that we only at this point really are replacing what we've used, because we don't want to get into the situation where those cloudy days come to hurt us. Here's the notes section. And so yeah, we're getting pretty good at this whole prediction thing, hitting it pretty close. And so then the following day, we're looking back at that. Let's pull that prediction, that forecast back up here. And so yeah, like I said, we're getting pretty good at predicting this whole thing, but that also means now that we've got a couple of days coming that are going to be pretty cloudy. So the 11 kilowatt hours that we charged in the car was basically putting back into the vehicle what it had used that day to replenish it. And with 87% cloud cover predicted for the following day, leaving the system at 60%, that'll mean that start of the day tomorrow, or that day, will be roughly 40%. And if you don't get any, then if you get no contribution, then that's your baseline. And so then the following day will leave you at 20%, and so on and so forth. So you can predict that from here you have roughly 3 days. If you don't drive, well, we're still driving. So on March 22nd, what do we have? Well, we did okay. Wound up with production of 17.8 kilowatt hours, pretty good for that high 80s to 90s range, but still didn't really match the usage, obviously. And so then that leaves us, here's our notes section, basically right in line with what we predicted. And so with more rainy weather predicted on the 24th and 25th, now we're into that point where it's another nail biter. So as the notes say, that's where we're at. And so again, like I said when I started this video, I've actually recorded this after the fact, so I actually know how this comes out. But no spoilers. So you'll have to tune in a couple of hours when I post the month closeout for April. So again, it's going to be done in two parts. The next video, we will close out the final week up to the 28th, 29th of March, and then the video after that will be our closeout for the month of March, where we'll go through it as we have in the past, day by day. So thank you very much for your patience, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on this, and also about how you're all doing with your own systems. And I'll get cranking on the next one, and we'll see you in a few hours.